Hola, mis amigos. This is a video response to Robert Wallace, who made a video response to me. Link in the description box to both of our videos, because this is a conversation back and forth that some of you probably have been waiting for any YouTuber to do. So, yeah, lots of content. So my first thought in watching Robert Wallace's video was that was painfully trollish of you to show me your bong and defend it. And I just want to know, were you high when you tried to repair your bong? That's because if you weren't high, maybe you would have had better faculties and been able to, you know, discern which pole of the magnet is which. Anyways, so I thought about your bong problem, and I think what you need might be a washer. Because, see, watch this. Let's see. I've got a neodymium magnet here on this magnet, and it's got a handle because it's fucking strong. And this one too, right? And if I try to push them together, I can't do it. It likes to slip and go to the side, that magnetic force. But if I get something steel and I put it in the middle, that was right there, and that goes right there. And see how close they are? That's closer than I can push them together, right? Because something about attracting to this steel makes that possible. So, if you were to just, in between those two magnetic parts between your bowl and your bong, put a washer, maybe that would fix the problem. And it might make a good seal, I don't know. It might be leaky. You might want to put a little coating of silicone, heat-resistant silicone on that washer. But you can do this with the magnet reversed, I think. Far be it for me, though, to help someone use their drug of choice, which is keeping them from using basically all other drugs of choice. That would be too harm reduction of me, wouldn't it? That's a little absurd. Anyways, do I want marijuana criminalized? I live in Colorado, where it was legalized for recreational use. And that helps a lot of people who can't afford, say, a doctor's visit to get a prescription for getting a red card. It helps a lot of people just try it out. You can literally spend $10 and get a cookie from a dispensary that's just the newbie cookie, right? It's got 5 grams of THC in it, and you can just cut off a little piece and see if that helps you with whatever you're trying to help. So, yeah, it's very, very easy to get cannabis here in my state. And do I want it criminalized? No. No. Now, see, I do recognize, as an addiction counselor, that cannabis is a gateway drug, right? No doubt about it. The science is behind that. But, you know what's a bigger gateway drug? Sorry, it's not a drug, but it's a bigger factor in whether or not somebody's going to use harder substances. Felony convictions. A lot of my clientele who use heroin, meth, or cocaine, they don't have much to live for in life, because anywhere where they try to make a life for themselves, their criminal record is going to hold them back. So, without hope, they just turn to the drugs because why not? Fuck it. My life is fucked. I've got this record that follows me for fucking ever because America doesn't believe in the fundamental Christian values of forgiveness and redemption. So they like to attach felony records to everyone to create a caste system. So it's that caste system where people have this felony record following them around that I feel is far worse of a factor in determining whether or not somebody's going to use those harsher drugs. So, yeah, I don't want marijuana criminalized because that just makes more people who are going to use harder drugs than just using the marijuana itself. My opinion. Let's see. Robert said that if I'm assuming that if someone is sitting across from my table at my job, if I'm assuming that something is wrong with the situation, then I'm wrong because I'm making a leaping assumption there. Well, in many of the cases where I would make this assumption, there's nothing wrong with making that assumption. If I were working in an emergency room, say, if I were contracted to come do a whole bunch of assessments in that emergency room, something brought them there. And in fact, the first question out of my mouth is probably, this is just stereotypical me here, so, how did we get here? You know? And that's where the bias leads, that first question. That icebreaker right there. So, how did we get here? You know? And more often than not, they are forthcoming with the problem in the first few sentences that they respond with. Also, if I were to go to a detox, most of the people there were either taken there by police, taken there by a emergency services patrol, a special ambulance that wanders the streets looking for drunk people. They admitted themselves, you know, or they were drunk in the emergency room and got shipped over there. So there's not a lot of scenarios that could play out that could get you put in a detox that you know aren't problematic. You know, I can assume that yes, there is a problem, and yes, that problem will lead to one of the criteria that could diagnose someone with at least a mild substance use disorder if they are sitting in front of me at most of the places that I would be working. Now, Robert's specific example was that somebody who is referred to drug treatment from, say, their probation officer or a court, who's just simply using cannabis for recreational purposes and does not have a problem, this person I should not assume that they have something wrong with them just by the fact that they're sitting across from me. Here's my response to that. If you have sanctions legally against you, it's not my job to decide whether or not that should be legal or illegal. But if you are on probation or parole and a judge puts you in front of me, that means that you can't comply with those sanctions. And I'm going to bring you back to what I said at the end of the last video. There's so many people who say, I can put this down whenever I want. It's fucking cliche, right? If you can't put it down for legal sanctions against you, if someone has explained to you from this place of authority that, you know, you are under this circumstance legally, you're on probation or parole, and you're not allowed to use cannabis, and you can't fucking do it for a couple months, there is a problem. In fact, in the criteria, it says, one of the bullet points there, it says you can't, you basically can't complete social contracts, you can't live up to your responsibilities, you know. That's at least one of the criteria met right there. If you have been given a sanction legally and you can't complete it. So, yes, I can assume that there is a problem if this person was sentenced to be in front of me. Okay? Based on the criteria that are in the DSM, based on that's how I would diagnose someone. Yes, I can assume that they have at least got one of the criteria met. And then the other one would be the basic craving. So there they've got two, and 2 is the minimum for mild substance use disorder. So, yeah. Basically, It's not a racket, as Bob put it, but it's a no-brainer. Seriously, it's like the gears are in motion as soon as they send them to me. You know. So next, Bob said that criminal justice rackets with substances, they exist, and I'm going to say yes. I mean, as far as like for-profit prisons lobbying Congress to keep certain substances illegal, where there's a large percentage of our prisons that are full of, because of all of these substance users. Yeah, there is a racket there going on. I would say if we could decriminalize a lot of the just cannabis, we could take a good percentage of those prison beds and empty them. But see what would happen then, which is happening here in Colorado as a response to the opiate epidemic. Basically, other prisoners will get longer sentences. The fact that we have overcrowded prisons right now actually might be helping those who are trying to get good time and get out early. And if we take a chunk of the beds and empty them, then we're going to keep them full somehow. A large portion of the decision as to whether or not to grant clemency to other prisoners is how crowded are these prisons. It's quota based, and that sucks. It should be that your own crimes dictate your own sentence, and your own actions after the fact give you the good or bad time towards finishing off your sentence and your time on paper. But that's just not how the world works, because there is somewhat of a racket, and it is business based, and I agree. Also, part of this racket is the different drugs and their classifications, especially cannabis being Schedule 1. But also, when I see a client and their drug of choice is crack, I have a bias myself against this system to where I will write it up as cocaine, right? Because if somebody's using cocaine, that's a classy thing. If they're smoking crack, then they need to be thrown in jail. That's the characterization that will happen there. So I have a bias myself of writing things up as just cocaine. There are many drop-down menus on computer programs where it'll say cocaine or crack or cocaine hydrochloride, all of that stuff under one drop-down button, so I will select that button and just leave it at that, because I don't want my clients stigmatized. Also, there are places in America where the size of your beer is regulated. By this I mean 24-ounce beers, or even 44-ounce beers. Anything like large is restricted. And this is kind of like the New York City soda ban, where like large sodas are banned. You have to like buy these small ones so that you recognize with each purchase that you're drinking another serving. But there's something different about these 24-ounce beer bans, and that is they're targeting minorities who have it as part of their culture. And that's wrong. I get that. That's why crack is so much worse than cocaine. That's why drugs that rich white-collar people use are not as criminalized as drugs that poor people use. There's this horrible connection between the racism and cultural identity of certain areas in our country and the laws that they make. I would agree with Robert's other statement that swapping out cannabis in the place of harder drugs, if it works, is a really good harm reduction thing to do. If you are going to get off of, let's say, OxyContin, and instead of going to heroin, you find a strain of cannabis that takes your pain away, if you were sitting across the table from me and you said that's your plan, I would grab your hand and say, let's go all in on that. Yes. Less harm to you. In many states, it's more legal to do. Yes, let's do that. And then when we're solidly just using cannabis, I'm going to push a little bit further. I always take and take and take, baby steps. As soon as we get to just being a cannabis user, I'm going to work on that too. And if that's not a thing that I can get you to budge on, at least we've had harm reduction. But also, there are other drugs that I've seen substituted for these harder drugs. And also behaviors. Behaviors that can become obsessive. And this is not like the harm reduction of a needle program where we're giving out free needles to heroin addicts just for that kind of harm reduction. I'm talking about like when someone starts going to a gym excessively. Have you ever been to a fucking CrossFit gym? Okay? The way that these people buy their food at Sprouts is not right. The way that people will start packing on 8,000 calories and worth of protein into their diet in order to achieve gains, and the high that they're getting, the endorphins that are being released from all of that exercise, it's not as bad as heroin, I will agree, but it's also harmful to the body. If you think about how many times in your life do you think you could swing a hammer? How many times in your life do you think that you can do a bench press before your joints give out? You will create wear and tear on your joints. You could, if you're not lifting right, if you're not exercising right, you can get problems with your tendons and ligaments. I've seen someone who can hang like this, like with his arm bent because he's got shortened tendons and tendonitis and whatnot, and he can literally hang like this, like for freaking ever in a CrossFit gym because he was muscle bound for so long, but he wasn't doing it right, and so he had no range of motion left, and so he could just do that. Yeah, also, from an atheist perspective, when I see someone going to 12-step groups more than, say, 2 times a night, I think that there could be something more constructive they could do with their lives, It is harm reduction in that they're not using their drugs in that time that they're in that meeting. But when you see someone who fills all of their free time with 12-step groups or going to church, you've basically replaced your drug with a religion. And religion is der opiate of der folks, So, yeah, it's not hurting them as much, but I do see still there is harm that could be worked on. And many people, after they do their 90 groups in 90 days tour of going to different 12-step groups, they taper off and they only go to like one a week. And that's, that's, in my opinion, healthy. But I have seen people who cannot do anything but work, sleep, and do 12-step groups. And they're addicted to going to the 12-step groups. The fellowship that they get from them and retelling their story over and over again, they get addicted to it. Also, I would wholeheartedly agree with Robert Wallace that 12-step groups are flawed. The whole 12-step programs, they're flawed. And he's pointing to step 9. There are other steps that I would point to as well. But in my opinion, the thing that works about 12-step groups is not the steps. It's the fellowship. You know, you get someone who has burned all their bridges. They have basically nowhere else to go where people will accept them, and you give them a set of friends that they can start over with. And if you're in a big enough city, if you burn your bridges with those friends, you can find another group and another group and another group. And it kind of removes the rock bottom of complete solitude, which can really magnify drug abuse when people are alone all the time. So to me, that's the good part of 12-step groups. The bad part is that it's shoehorning in religion into people's lives. As Robert was talking, I felt about a little bit of identification with the replacing one drug with another, in that when I got rid of Mountain Dew, I tried other things like coffee and tea to restrict the amount of sugar that I was putting in to my system, and it didn't work as well. You know, tea does not replace Mountain Dew very well. You could put as much honey or sugar as you want into tea, and there are still things about Mountain Dew that it's just not doing. I also wish that the VA would consider prescribing cannabis, especially for PTSD. So the fact that in my state, because it's still federally illegal, most hospitals, even just state affiliated hospitals, they get some sort of federal money, you know, and they're afraid. And so the only providers you can find that prescribe cannabis are people who specialize in it and get their money up front, you know. And cannabis has been kind of restricted as far as it being studied because of the federal laws versus the state laws. And, you know, there's all sorts of claims that I've seen with not peer-reviewed studies, especially cannabis cures cancer with apoptosis. Go ahead and look that word up on Google. Yeah, I wish that there could be more research into it, because right now we've got people basically going on rumors on the internet to form their opinions. I also agree that cannabis could be better in many cases than big pharmaceuticals that are trying to compete. I also, I have this general wish that everyone would have a life coach, and I've said this in a previous video before, but I actually wish that everyone would have that in their lives, and, you know, that is a bias that counselors get. I am now using different forms of life coaching myself, and if I were to prescribe something to anyone first, I'd just say, get a self-help book. You know, that's like the lowest level of care that I could give you. My dogs are going to start barking up a storm now because Misty's home. So I'm going to go eat dinner, and whatever responses I get from this, I'll try to respond to in another video, because those dogs are really happy she's home.